Okay, I get it. I know, and you said that before. Okay. Can I talk now? Is it my turn? Okay, here, I'm just gonna end it like this. The next time your dog takes a crap in my yard, I'm gonna take it, put it in your mailbox. I'm going to ring your doorbell and tell you you have mail. Because I'm absolutely tired of dealing with that every day. Every darn day. Hello? Alright. Hey, we're talking about anger. And it's a challenging question. Chap, I've got anger issues. My wife tells me I've got anger issues. What can I do about it? And I often feel a little guilty because I don't have the simple solution. I don't have the magic dust poof and all of a sudden your anger issues are gone. So what I want to do right now is I want to look at a passage of Scripture. It's not necessarily where Jesus was angry, but it's where he was provoked to anger, where he was harassed, where the Pharisees, these religious leaders, were sticking their finger in his chest. And I just kind of want to make some observations about it. And maybe it can help us in dealing with our anger. Maybe you've got issues at work or at home or with a neighbor whose dog craps in your yard. But let's find out what we can do that we not overcome our anger, but to not be overcome by our anger. It's Matthew chapter 12, and the backstory is this. Jesus is out and about doing his ministry, and he's consistently being confronted, challenged, harassed by these religious leaders, the Pharisees, who are with him every step of the way, not letting him alone, not letting him breathe, and challenging every little thing that he does. And in Matthew chapter 12, you can see here, just in verses 1 and 2. It says, at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to eat some heads of grain. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. So they're just picking grains of wheat to get something to eat. And the disciples, like the Donna Paparazzi, are right there in his face trying to stump him, to prove to the world that he's a hypocrite. All of these little things here. That would make me angry because this was going on for some time. I'm not going to read it now, but in verses 3 through 8, Jesus responds to their challenge. How dare you, go on the Sabbath and pick this grain? It's religiously wrong. It breaks the religious law. So Jesus gives a rationed, reasoned, biblical response based on a story from the life of David. And I don't want to kind of get into that, but I want to jump to verse 9. It says, going on from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. And check this out. It says, looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, they asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And so if you notice, the Pharisees followed Jesus from the grain field into the synagogue, and again with the same motives, trying to stump and stumble Jesus, challenge him with a question. They're provoking this guy. But right here, let's stop, and I want to make one of a couple of observations, okay? So in the first question, Jesus responds with Scripture for his reasoned, rationed response. And then we see here that Jesus goes from the grain field to the synagogue. So it's apparent Jesus uses Scripture, enters the synagogue. Faith was important to Jesus. Observation number 1 is that Jesus had life givers in his life. He had things that were sources of positive energy and positive support. It's clear that Jesus' faith was important to him. He had something pouring into his life as the Pharisees were trying to suck energy out and create negativity in his life. His relationship with God, his relationship with the church and that church community brought life into him. You have life givers and you have life takers. Okay, what are your life givers? What are those things in your life that feed you, breathe life into you? You can answer the question of what are the life takers. That's easy. What are the life givers? We see here, Jesus had life givers. His faith in God, his relationship with his Father was a life giver. What are yours? So we look at, back to the story is that Jesus is in the synagogue. and there's a man there with a broken hand or withered hand, and the Pharisees say, "You're not supposed to heal that guy on the Sabbath." And so Jesus' response is hey guys, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit, into a hole on the Sabbath, you'll not take hold of it. Will you not take hold of it and lift it out? In other words, won't you do something about it? How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? And so therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. A very, again, logical, well-reasoned, and thoughtful response to the Pharisees' challenge. And what I observe here, and this is the second observation, is if number one was Jesus had life givers, number two is that Jesus knew his why. Jesus defended his actions without getting angry and without getting defensive. He knew why he did what he did. He had carefully thought out in his mind his motivations and his actions. And if you look at why people get angry, one reason why people get, or three reasons why people get angry, is embarrassment, frustration, and failure. And when you are challenged in a way that you don't know the answer to the question, or you can't give a good, adequate reasoned response to why you do what you do, then you're embarrassed and you're frustrated and you can see failure on the horizon. And those three things are a gateway drug to anger. And so, but Jesus knew his why. And so he didn't have to jump to defensiveness. He didn't have to jump to anger. He could give that rational reasoned response. It reminds me of Proverbs chapter 15, verse 28. It says, "The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer." They think about what their motives are, but the mouth of the wicked blurts out evil. And so the heart of the righteous considers their motives, considers their priorities, considers and thoughtfully, carefully are able to articulate them, but the mouth of the wicked just goes right to defensiveness. Okay? And so that's why Jesus could respond with confidence and say, you know what? Yes, it is right to do good on the Sabbath. I had already thought this out, and so I'm ready for your question. But let's jump to verse 13. It says here, "Then Jesus said to the man with the withered hand, 'Stretch out your hand.' So Jesus stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other." Jesus heals the man despite the Pharisees' challenge. Jesus did not allow the Pharisees to control his behavior. They were trying to control what Jesus did, but Jesus did what he felt was right. Observation number 3. If observation number 1 was that Jesus had life givers, and observation number 2 was Jesus knew his why, and we can use this in our lives, observation number 3 was that Jesus maintained control of his life. Another reason why we get angry is this thing called powerlessness. When we feel powerlessness, when we feel like our ability to control our own lives, decisions, or destiny is taken from us, we respond with anger. Jesus wasn't going to have any of that. Jesus did what he wanted. Yeah, I know you're trying to trick me into not doing this, but you know what? I'm going to heal this guy. Jesus maintained control of his life despite the opposition and challenge of the Pharisees. Verse 14, it says, after this encounter in the synagogue where Jesus heals this guy, the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. So the situation is escalating. And it is becoming increasingly more and more dangerous and volatile. Keep that in the back of your head as we jump to verse 15. Aware of this, Jesus recognizing this escalating situation, it says this. It says, Jesus withdrew from that place. Many followed him, and he healed all of their sick. 3 things, 3 observations in that little verse that Jesus does here. Observation number 4 is that in the face and aware of an increasingly volatile, escalating situation, it says Jesus withdrew himself from that place. Jesus was wise enough to get out of Dodge before Dodge got him. Before he got angry and began to lose control, he removed himself from this increasingly escalating situation, and we can do the same thing. When it's getting hot in the kitchen, it's time to leave. Get out, go somewhere for a walk, anywhere. Observation number 5, it says that many followed him. And I'm assuming his disciples were with him and many of his supporters were with him, because it makes my 5th observation is that Jesus surrounded himself with positive, supportive people. And it goes back to the first observation about having life givers. Life givers can be people, places, and things. And so, Jesus had his relationship with God, and that was important and a life-giving thing to him, as we talked about in observation number 1. But he also continued to support himself with positive people who encouraged him. So I say to you, if you're asking the question, how do I deal with my anger? Who are the positive people that are breathing life into you? That's observation number 5. And observation number 6, the scripture says that, and he healed all of their sick. Observation number 6 is that Jesus continued to do good things, to encourage, to serve, to breathe life into people. And it brings me back to something I've talked about in a couple of my other videos, is that when you do good things, when you serve others, when you encourage people, it releases this biological reaction in your body of releasing hormones, the happiness trifecta of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin into your system that produce a feeling of feeling good and calming you down and positive energy. And so as Jesus was healing all of these people and doing good, it was releasing these things into his body that was calming him down and giving him more of a positive outlook. So, there is no simple solution to dealing with anger. But, in this passage, we see 6 observations that can help us not be overcome when we face provocation, someone sticking their finger in our chest and dealing with anger. Number 1 is that Jesus had life givers. What are your life givers? What are those things in your life that breathe positivity into you? Number 2 is that Jesus knew his why. So when he was challenged, he didn't jump to anger or defense. He knew why he did what he did. Have you thought out why you make the decisions that you do, and give a rationed, reasoned response? Number 3 is that Jesus maintained control over his life, destiny, and decisions. He didn't fork it over to the Pharisees. Jesus didn't have to deal with that sense of powerlessness. Number 4, he removed himself from the escalating situation. Number 5, he continued to surround himself with supportive people. And number 6, Jesus blessed and served and encouraged others. And in doing so, just triggered that biological reaction of releasing positive, stimulating hormones into his system. So there are things that we can do in dealing with our anger. And so that being said, please walk in peace, have the best day possible, and as always, stay awesome.